Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Safe State Gamer Show, Gilligan's Island. You'll hear in the background an OC remix version of the theme from A Boy and His Blob, which was a game that I really enjoyed as a child, and I love the music. I think there's only like one song that plays throughout the game, but it's excellent. This is also the first time that I mined OC remix for my background music, which I think I did for, well, nearly every episode after this. Uh, I really like this episode. I'll get into why in a moment. Specifically, this exchange here with the video game sprite highlights two things. One, this was definitely a meta joke. Boers himself has no problem inserting video game sprites. I did, because I used Windows Movie Maker and I had no clue how to do it. And there's no joke that I wanted to make more than that, to have him have an interaction with a video game sprite. So I made this joke, and I quite I quite like it. The fact that I had to resort to this one-sided, psychotic conversation between him and this imaginary character. I really do enjoy that. And obviously, later on, I did learn how to insert a video game sprite. There's one enormous example of that, and we will discuss that where it comes up. I'm sure you know exactly who I mean. What was the other thing I wanted to say about that? Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to say is that it sort of highlights the joke. A joke is that Crisbo's the only one who works on this show. He doesn't have a crew. He doesn't create the footage and deliver it to somebody and they package it up for him. He stitches this entire product together. So imagine the mentality of the man who would leave that exchange in his final product. There are a few more examples later on, and I know that that's just kind of a typical thing to do in an Irate Gamer parody, is to have him vocalize, how pathetic he is or some such thing. And that's fine, it's very funny. But within the reality of the Save State Gamer, I actually wanted that to be sort of a subliminal runner. The fact that he has this awareness, he has this sort of self-loathing, and it manifests itself even in this. This should be his chance to shine, is the Save State Gamer Show, and even there he can't sort of keep out the awareness of his own limitations and his own dissatisfaction with his life. That clip, by the way, was from some ALF episode. I was actually looking for real Gilligan's Island footage, and YouTube or wherever I searched had an episode of ALF that had the reunion of the Gilligan's Island cast, and it was just such a happy accident that I had to use that. It was a perfect Irate Gamer and Save State Gamer kind of joke. You'll notice there's actually no background music in this episode aside from the intro, and a later montage. And I stand corrected. In an earlier video, I said that I always used background music after that point, and I guess that wasn't the case. But the fact that this episode comes together so well made it easy for me to forget the little things that were actually still missing from the formula. One of the little jokes, I think it just passed by, subconscious plagiarism from the third-rate gamer, so it's only fair that I point that out. I make a little joke about, boy, this intro is so long, it's totally unnecessary. By the way, I still need someone to write me a theme song. And it's not exactly the joke that Third Rate Gamer made, but it's pretty darn close. In his home improvement review, which is actually, I used Boers' home improvement review as the base work for this, if it wasn't obvious. His joke was, this is such a long and pointless introduction, and then he actually just cut away to his own introduction. Brilliant joke. I stole it. It's changed a little bit. It's not nearly as funny, but oops, it's only fair I confess. And in the DSI video, by the way, there's a very similar joke that Mediocre Gamer made before I did about the Contra games being both on his best of list and his worst of list. Again, very similar joke, not intentional. I will point these out, by the way. If I'm aware of them, I will point out where subconscious plagiarism might have occurred. I can promise that I never intentionally burgled a joke, but it kind of happens when you're mining the same ground. And, that could be an excuse. You could just kind of shrug that off. But at the same time, it's only fair to acknowledge it if you become aware later on. It's easy to do a similar joke as somebody else, but it's worth pointing out. the NES guide thing in the lower left. I don't know if anyone ever actually noticed that. Nearly all of the jokes that I make get some kind of response in the comments, and that never did. I just wanted to make it obvious that he was stealing this footage. Um, the one more thing before we move on, the gay porn box in the background. Crisbo's sexuality is something that people ask about very frequently. Even now on some of the comments for the commentary vids, people wonder, is he gay? What's the deal? Some people don't actually. Someone commented that they didn't like those jokes. They thought it was a little too obvious, a little too overt. Um, Thank you. I appreciate that you think that's too overt compared to my other humor, which is presumably more subtle. Uh, my idea isn't necessary, and also I do want to point out before I move on from that, I'm several commentaries deep right now. That was never a shot at Boers. I don't think anyone really suspects that Chris Boers is a homosexual or anything. This was specifically Save State Gamer. Same thing with the gestures and things like that. Totally tailored to this character specifically, utterly divorced from the irate gamer. I never wanted to suggest that I had any kind of suspicions about Boers or to spread anything. Crisbo himself, however, my sort of idea of the character, in terms of his sexuality, was that he was completely inexperienced. Obviously, he dated Jennifer, and he carries a torch for her, so he's not a homosexual. At the very, at most, he could be bisexual. But I think my idea was that he was a virgin. He had no sexual experience whatsoever. And so it's just this kind of enthusiastic confusion that has him interested in all types of pornography. I don't think it's like an obsession kind of thing. I don't really see him as a pervert. I just see him as sort of like a wide-eyed man-child where everything is new to him, and he's so excited to just, even be able to witness any of it in a pornographic context. I really did like that moment, by the way, earlier where he says his bedroom, and then he says, no, I mean my studio, and he pulls on his collar. Very David Brent moment. The Office, the UK version of The Office, without any question, was a model for me and my sort of comedy of discomfort. And my favorite moments from Save State Gamer happen to be those moments, I think almost exclusively. There's a really, really great one that I love that I'll point out in a later video. I actually forget which one it is, but I do recall the moment. The song is Elements by Lemon Jelly. Do me a favor. Or, do me a favor. Fuck that. Do yourself a favor. Pick up the first two Lemon Jelly albums, by the way. KY, and I think Lost Horizons is the second one. Front to back, they are excellent albums. I just kind of use this as a clip because, one, I like the song, and two, I just thought it was a very silly song to use for a montage of, like, an exciting video game moment. I exclusively chose as my video games. Someone asked me how I chose the video games. I exclusively chose games I actually liked, and this really factors into what you're seeing right now. With the exception of the Split Timelines video, and that's actually one of my very large regrets about that video. We'll get to that later on. But with that exception, I either chose games that I really enjoyed or games that I had a nostalgic remembrance of, I guess, a pleasant memory of. And for Gilligan's Island, a friend of mine, when I was a little kid, he and I rented Gilligan's Island over the weekend, and it was awful. It was a terrible game. But we devoted that weekend to beating the first level, and it was a solid weekend. Remember this card here. I'm going to return to this momentarily. We devoted that weekend to beating the game, and it was an awful game. It was controlled poorly. Everything about it was just terrible. And it consisted of running back and forth and talking to characters and avoiding enemies so you wouldn't die and picking up this item and going back to that guy to give him that item and so on and so forth. Until finally, we beat the game. Right? Nope, the cutscene played and level 2 loaded. We honestly thought that we beat the whole game. And it just so happened that in Boers' Home Improvement review, he made such a stupid comment about that. I mean, the difference was my friend and I were probably 9 years old at the time. We invested a lot of effort. Boers is, in his late 20s or something and used a cheat code to get to level 2. It's not really comparable. But I wanted to kind of pay homage to that genuine memory. I have a lot of memories of games being horrible as a child, and they're actually very pleasant memories. I do have a lot of fondness for video games, and that's something I really don't think that Boers has, to be honest. I think the AVGN does legitimately have a fondness even for bad games, whereas Boars doesn't have a fondness for even the good ones. Um, but that title card, and then I guess that's the last thing I have to say about this video, is one, probably my first Game Dude joke. That would be a very fruitful vein to mine later on. And two, sort of the original conception, I guess, of Crisbo is that he neglected to acknowledge the angry video game nerd. He didn't like him, and in the previous video, he made the going down to hell comment about Wizard of Oz Part Two, well, I don't know, whatever that stupid movie is. Um, and later on, which is kind of the Boars thing, is just to pretend he doesn't exist. I found it out very quickly. It was a much more rewarding comic area to explore if Crisbo has more of an Alexander 4488 divine reverence for the AVGN. It turned out to be much funnier and a much more exciting um, realm of comedy to explore. So I guess that's really it. This will be a pretty short commentary. I'm going to have more to say in the later videos. Thank you for watching.